welcome to Incorruptible Mass. Our mission here is to help us all transform state politics because we know that we could have a state legislature that truly met the needs of the vast majority of the residents of our beautiful state. Today, we are going to be talking about the economy. We're going to be talking about monopolies, about pricing abuses and algorithms and surveillance. We're going to be talking about how we can combat these things at the state level. We'll be talking about how our whole United States economy is being propped up by data centers and AI. We'll be tying all of this into the elections that happened on Tuesday, and going into some discussion of what our government is currently choosing to do, and who it's privileging, who is not privileging. And we have an amazing guest who, if you like the three of us, you're going to love this guy. So, but before I introduce Pat Garofalo, I am going to have my illustrious co-hosts introduce themselves, and I will start with Jonathan.
Hello, no, Jonathan Cohen, he, him, his. I'm joining from Boston in the South End. I've been active with progressive issue and electoral campaigns here in Massachusetts for a little over a decade.
Jordan.
Jordan Powers, he, him, and I am in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I have worked around lots of progressive policy and especially economics my whole life, and I have gray hair.
And I am Anna Callahan, she, her, coming at you from Medford, where I recently got reelected, woo, with a whole slew of progressives. We did really well, despite our fears. It was a great day, so great election day, which we'll talk about later in terms of national elections. And now I would love to have Pat Garofalo, who's the Director of State and Local Policy at the American Economic Liberties Project, introduce himself. Pat, tell us who you are and the work you do.
Hey, thanks so much. It's so great to be here and to be chatting with you all. My name is Pat. I run the State and Local Policy Program at the American Economic Liberties Project. I've been doing that for a little over 5 years now. And we focus on issues of corporate power and corporate consolidation. So I've basically spent that time organizing both elected officials and advocates to work on policy solutions to fight corporate consolidation and corporate power. So that's a little bit of antitrust, it's a little bit of economic development, it's a little bit of labor law. It's a lot of making the largest corporations in America very mad at me.
Awesome. And I'm going to tell you, if anyone listening is concerned about corporate consolidation, you should really look at the media. And I've been encouraged to put our mid-roll at the beginning. This is now a big beginning roll, which is that if you listen to this and if you are concerned about the media and how much the media has consolidated and how it does not report on stories that we report on, if it does not talk about the issues that we are about to talk about, please donate to the show. There's a link below. None of it goes to us who speak on camera. It all goes to our young people who help us to put this show together with graphics and video editing and social media and all of that good stuff. Thank you so much.
Quickly to chime in, the topic of kind of reigning in corporate power just reminded me of there was kind of Oxfam does its annual reporting about how much kind of the top billionaires in the country or the world are gaining in wealth. And it was just kind of just a few days ago where we saw that the top 10 U.S. billionaires' collective wealth grew by almost $700 billion in the past year, with Elon Musk now getting his $1 trillion, getting to be like a trillion, or what I've seen. I think that his board recently voted for him. That can get worse. But one of the things in the report noted that if we're actually serious about addressing kind of that kind of extreme inequality, one of the strategies is reigning in corporate power, to rein in the ability of anybody to have those obscene amounts of money that enable them to rig both the economy and the political system in their favor. But I'll go back to you, Anna.
Oh, well, let's turn it over to Pat. I'd love to hear you talk about this consolidation, monopolies. Give us an intro. What state are we in?
Not a good one. So the key fact to know is that in the last 3 decades, 70% of U.S. industries have become more consolidated. So there's the obvious ones, right? Retail, big tech. But this is everything from eyeglasses to veterinarians to funeral homes. There's been both a consolidation in terms of mergers and acquisitions. The federal government has totally failed to stop big mergers amongst big corporate players, but also an underlying thread of smaller acquisitions and what we call roll-ups done by things like private equity firms and venture capital firms, where they buy up a ton of really small entities in a particular industry. This is what you're seeing in things like veterinarians and dental care and physicians' practices. And they buy a bunch of really small entities, and those acquisitions run under the radar until you wake up one day and 85% of the dentists in a state all work for the same soulless private equity firm that is actually based, 6 states over. So that's been one of the huge unnoticed underlying threads in the American economy. And a lot of our economic, and I would argue even social problems, are downstream of the amount of corporate consolidation that has happened. You see the control of not just information, not just economic power, but then also power over the democracy, right? Because the move that monopolies make is they roll up their monopoly. They then use that dominance to push down and prevent anyone else from entering the market that might compete with them economically, and then entrench that power politically. That is always the really key final step, is to then go to a place like the state legislature and say, you need to set all these rules that maintain my monopoly. And so at the federal level, we saw, 40, 50 years of the mindset, which started a little under Carter and then was really enhanced by Reagan, and then Clinton and Bush and Obama didn't really do anything about it. This belief in bigger is better, bigger is always more efficient. We don't need those small local businesses anymore. You did get a half a minute break.
I was wondering,
Biden
administration, right?
It was a lot of, yeah, many faults. I'm not on the Biden administration. I'm not here to relitigate all of those. But the one thing they did well was put people in power who didn't think that way. Lena Khan at the Federal Trade Commission, Rohit Chopra at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Jonathan Cantor running the Antitrust Division at the Department of Justice. All of them both believed in the power of government to rein in corporate consolidation, but also just rejected the dogma of the past 40 and 50 years that said bigger is always better. And it's hard to understate how bipartisan that consensus became amongst both Democrats and Republicans, that we just need these giant corporations to do all the things and the world will be better. And so those enforcers particularly rejected that. Now they're gone, and we're back in this situation where not only is the old dogma in place again, but we're seeing it corrupted to a cartoonish level, right? You can just go to the Department of Justice and basically buy a merger enforcement action at this point, and corporate America realizes that and is acting accordingly. So the thing that I spent all my time working on and thinking about is the federal government's out to sea on this and is making everything worse. So what can and should state government be doing to stem the tide?
Oh, well, you are in the right place, right? Because really, we used to just talk about state politics. We've started to work in some national stuff, especially since our state politics is so boring. They don't do anything. So we would love to hear from you some of the policies that other states are doing. What are some options that we have to help kind of rein this in?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is that state AGs are playing an important and growing role in this area, and the best of them are really stepping up and are really stepping into the void that has been left at the federal level. When I say the best of them, I think of folks like Chris Mays in Arizona, Keith Ellison in Minnesota, Tish James in New York, Rob Bonta in California. They have really made it a point to step up on the enforcement side, because an interesting thing that a lot of people don't know or forget, and a lot of state AGs would prefer you don't know, is that state AGs can enforce federal law over in the antitrust space. They can use the Sherman Act and the Clayton Act, which are federal antitrust laws. They can enforce those on behalf of their states. As long as someone in their state is being affected, they can wield the same powers that the feds use under those same federal laws. So that's step one, is just do the thing that the federal government is not doing. But then those folks and others like them are actually working through their state legislatures to increase their powers for the modern economy. Because a really important thing about antitrust law is both through, actually, I was going to say both through the text and the precedent, but it's actually not really the text. The text is fine. The precedent that's lying around makes it really hard to take action against the monopolies of today. Your Facebooks and your Googles that don't cost anything, where the cost is your privacy and your data and your time, can be really hard. And Amazon, where their whole thing is supposedly low prices. They don't trigger a lot of antitrust laws. This is how Lena Khan got famous, was by writing a law review article saying, look at how our antitrust laws are not equipped to deal with an Amazon. So a lot of states are, in addition to taking those federal laws and using them to the extent they can, stepping up with new solutions to the problems that we face now. And the things that are top of mind for me are California just recently passed a first in the nation law against what's called algorithmic price fixing. So this is the practice of multiple corporations getting together and using algorithms to decide on common prices of goods or services. The most, I think, prevalent and famous example of this is in rental housing. There are a bunch of companies that sell software that corporate landlords use to collude on rental prices. They all enter all of their information, and then the algorithm spits back a price to all of them that is meant, really importantly, here's the key point, meant not to increase any of their revenue individually, but revenue across the market as a whole. So it's meant to inflate the rent prices across the entire market. So this law, and then actually a new law in New York that's aimed specifically at rental housing, would prevent that practice. Our price fixing law is just, as courts have shown, just not really equipped for that problem. And so that's a way in which states are stepping up. There are other examples, and I'm happy to get into them, but that one is really top of mind for me right now.
Let me jump in on that one because I think about that a lot. Like as a local legislative official, I think about that because people make all these arguments about housing and the price of housing, and why the price of housing goes up. And they say things like, oh, but if you raise taxes, then landlords will raise the price of housing. And the thing that people don't understand is that, that may be true for the in-town folks who live in the building, don't have a lot of, money in the bank in case their tenants leave. So they keep their rents low. But like all of these corporate owners who own like thousands of units, they raise the price as much as they can. Like that's their purpose is profit. So they raise the price as much as they can. If they can raise the price, they do. And it is independent of their costs. That is not what makes it go up. And so what you're talking about is they don't just raise it as much as they think they can get. Then they get AI to help them, and computers, algorithms to help them figure out how much they actually can raise it, and not just them, but everyone else, and to increase the price of housing regionally and across the country. And man, if that ain't bad news for us, I don't know what.
It's not just, I'll just say really quickly, it's not just like how much they can. It's that what it does is it's the reason why we've made this illegal, because there's no place else for people to go. So what happens is it's like when you do it across the board for everyone, it takes away the thing capitalism promises, which is that the market will fix itself. The market literally can't fix itself if you're not in competition with the landlord next door, right? Like if there's no competition, then they can just endlessly raise it until people are destitute or on the street, or they sort of hit the breaking point, which is just, so you get this, you get in the housing market, for example, ideally people are spending about 30% of their money on housing. In California, every single county, people are spending over 50 to 55% of their money on housing. Every county in California, most of the West Coast, most of the East Coast, like that is what happens when you have price fixing. Like this is what's happening, and it was happening informally in some places. You'll hear, I'm a small landlord. I own my 3-decker. I have other people, and I go to these events, and they'll talk to each other about it, right? Like they'll literally say, "How much are you raising?" Like they'll do it informally already, but like but with this things, they can do it so that everyone does it together, thus absolutely creating an end to the sort of like competition.
Absolutely, Jordan. That's exactly where I was going to go. There's like two insidious things that these tools help you accomplish. One is exactly as you said, cutting off any competitive pressure that may exist. The whole point is that everyone else is on the platform and that your competitor is not going to undercut you because the algorithm prevents them from doing that. Then the second thing is these algorithms inform landlords to keep units off the market in the name of keeping prices high, to actually keep units empty, that it is in their economic interest to restrict supply. And the interesting thing about the debate on that is when we go into legislative committee hearings on these types of bills, the first question is always, well, isn't this just capitalism. And yes and no. Econ 101 says that you need the government to prevent the formation of cartels, right? That a cartel will naturally form under Econ 101 if it's allowed to.
And that it destroys the market, right? That it destroys capitalism, right? Yeah. But in fact, Adam Smith, his whole concept of a free market meant something completely different from what we mean by free market. Like what he meant by free market was a market free of monopolies. And what we mean by a free market is people free to make monopolies.
It's interesting to point as well, particularly the way of like that kind of landlord incentive with creating artificial scarcity. It reminds me of something like, and I think I associate this with Andrew Cuomo, who thankfully lost in the recent New York mayoral race, of this combination of this like pro landlord NIMBYism that kind of was modeled by kind of Andrew Cuomo, where you can have different things, like things that are often described as being at odds, kind of uniting when it comes up about like who a market is being worked, or like who a market is designed to serve the interests of. That can scramble what people, the kind of ways that people typically understand a landscape of it.
So I think it's also, oh, go ahead.
That was actually a good segue, because I thought it was really interesting that a bunch of the candidates on Tuesday talked about this specific problem, and candidates who are not actually usually associated with that sort of rhetoric, like you saw Representative Sherrill in New Jersey, who won the gubernatorial race, literally talk about this problem, landlord collusion, as part of her kind of air quote affordability agenda. And it's interesting to me that this practice, which I think is emblematic of a lot of the rot in our economy, has cracked, where even this kind of milquetoast, center of the road, nothing special, pretty corporate Democrat at least feels compelled to talk about this problem. And again, I think it's really symbolic and emblematic of a lot of the sort of corporate abuses that we have allowed to fester. We just have not kept up with the power these monopolies have, the tactics that they use. And actually, this is the thing we always pitch to state legislatures is you have to eliminate these tactics as a whole. There are just some business practices that should not be allowed. And this is one of them, because even if you can come up with some merit for them, right, the harm is such that they just need to be thrown out. This also makes me think of something we were all chatting about a little earlier. I live in Washington, D.C., the obviously perfect place to do state-based policy from. And our attorney general recently launched a case against a crypto kiosk company. And his allegation is that 90% of the transactions that occur through these kiosks are scams, people being duped into giving their money to the company that's running these things. And we just simply should not tolerate that, even if you can come up with some innovation, competition, here's the future nonsense argument for that. Absolutely not. We should be unplugging those machines, throwing them in the Potomac River, because there is no benefit to something that 90% of the time is scamming you. And I put a lot of the tactics that corporations use these days, particularly on the pricing side, in that bucket.
And man, I say, look, scamming you, let's be clear, it's a legal fraud. So we're talking about crime committed by corporations called innovation. And this is the way that our whole society, in 2008, all it was, financial innovation is what it was called, until it crashed the entire economy and destroyed hundreds of thousands of people's lives. So one person, scamming gets thrown in jail, and a giant corporation scamming people is rewarded by our government.
Yeah,
So
basically, Jordan, go.
Yeah, I want to go back because I want to talk about a lot of these things are not, technology hides the fact that these are not actually new ideas. These are old scams. They're all old scams. So cartels were, when Anna, when you talk about Adam Smith is literally reacting to cartels. He's literally reacting to the very thing that we're approaching today, in which he's it doesn't help that you have all of these people who can't compete with prices with each other, and we're allowing that to happen under the guise of the same thing, right? Free market. But the person who created this idea is reacting to the very thing that's getting created. So there's nothing new about this idea. And so you're seeing price fixing and landlords is the real problem, because we all need to live someplace. But we're seeing it also with food, right? So you're seeing across the country, supermarkets are figuring out how to price fix so that across all areas, the prices are going up and they can make profits. That's not a new idea. That's a crime that got outlawed in America because it used to happen all the time. And people who are long since dead were like, we should probably fix this because we're elected representatives and this is hurting the people we're elected to represent. like I think that's my frustration is everyone in Democrats and Republicans today, politicians act like they're like they are helpless to the realities of these large corporations, but like there were bigger corporations with bigger power with actual violence who people who sat in their seats who were elected officials were like, no, but we're here to help people and we're going to put some laws in place and perfectly to try to at least tackle it. And so technology hides that a lot of these things are just old-fashioned crimes that other people have tried and really gotten rid of. And we could do the same today. And we should be asking our politicians and state governments to tackle it.
One of the motivating factors of the California price fixing law, according to the sponsor's office, was the French fry cartel. There's like a frozen potato cartel. It's like 4 companies control something like 85% of the market. And on grocery prices in particular, and I think this is really indicative of the sort of stuff that we're talking about, right? There is a federal law on the books. It's called the Robinson-Patman Act that was passed to prevent large grocery chains from getting better deals from suppliers than little bodegas and independent grocers. It was meant to address the economic power, the buyer power that an entity at the time was A&P could exert on suppliers, saying, because I'm your biggest buyer, you need to give me a much better deal and foist costs onto our independent competitors. That was outlawed federally, and the law never changed. It is on the books today in the form that it has been for decades. Literally just the government made a decision on the enforcement side and on the judicial side that it was outdated and they just weren't going to enforce it. And so it's still sitting there. And so someone can, and actually Lena Khan did, take it out and blow the dust off it and try and use it in a couple of cases. But to now come back around the circle, states can do the same thing. You can enforce that, or many states have their own mini versions of the Robinson-Patman Act. And actually in New York, there was just introduced last week a bill to beef up their state level Robinson-Patman equivalent, specifically in the grocery sector, because that's one of those areas where we're really, really seeing it. Walmart and the other large grocers, and they've been allowed to merge and merge and merge and merge. So you're really talking about a handful of corporations, even though the names on the stores are different. They exert their power to box small independent grocers out by simply demanding better prices. They can put on the shelf a product for cheaper than the independent grocer can buy it from the distributor. That's how great their economic power is. And so this stuff exists. You just have to use it, or in the case of a state legislator, make it better and ensure that your AG will use it.
So I'm going to chime in with 2 quick things. One, Jordan, your talk about kind of what Adam Smith had warned about years ago also just made me think of the kind of back in the day at that time where you did have like the king chartering corporations, and that kind of fusion of monarchical power and large corporate power is like very much so where the US is headed at this moment. If you look at DC, if you look at like the Trump Silicon Valley connection is very much so. Replay that. But also one thing that you had noted before about how with Lena Khan talking about the kind of other harms that monopoly can cause, I think is such an important one, because that the years of bipartisan belief that, well, maybe monopolies are actually good is based on this idea that, well, if they keep prices low, and then the monopoly is actually part of our affordability strategy of allowing these massive mergers and massive takeovers. And what we've seen is not only does that mean that you're actually having extraction happening somewhere else, whether it is because they are kept, whether it is in terms of workers suffering, other competitors suffering, privacy abuses, or other things, that their ultimate goal is never to keep prices low. The purpose of a monopoly is to have full control of the market and full price setting power for the market, not low prices.
So I want us to turn a little bit and think about the economy generally and how much I know I've been hearing about how like the majority of the reason that we are not currently in a recession is just because of AI and data centers. And if it weren't for them, we would be in a recession right now, like every other part of the economy is in recession. And I want us to talk a little bit about that aspect of the economy, the fact that the economy is doing very poorly, if we, take out that one piece, and how that affected the elections on Tuesday. We had some, really giant shifts towards the Democrats, whether progressive or not, but also I think the fact that affordability has been so strong and such an ability for Zoran Mamdani in New York City, to be able to have a truly remarkable win and remarkable voter turnout, that it seems like the other Democrats are catching up on that idea and are beginning to talk about that as well. That's a big topic, but Pat, if you can talk a little bit about those things, that would be great.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting the extent to which almost all of the candidates felt compelled to talk to the specific costs and specific corporate actors that were causing those costs to go up, calling out specifically utility companies, calling out specifically corporate landlords, calling out specifically healthcare middlemen. Abigail Spanberger has as one of her main campaign planks getting pharmacy benefit managers, which are mostly useless healthcare middlemen, out of the state's healthcare programs. Like, that's really interesting. Again, for someone who kind of has a reputation as this like milquetoast, corporate dem, ex-CIA, like not a real firebrand in the the mold of a Mamdani. So it was interesting to me that she felt the need to go there too. And I wrote a piece about this on my organization's Substack. It's called The Economic Populist, about it's going to be really important that all of these Democrats keep those promises now, because I think Biden fell into the trap of calling out high costs and then doing a bunch of stuff that wasn't felt immediately. It took, if it's implemented at all, which most of it is not yet, it was not implemented fast enough to actually feel. Trump called out a lot of specific costs, and as we've been talking about, has just decided to like sell all of those agencies who would do anything about it to the highest bidder. So it's now really, really important for the Democrats who won on Tuesday to do things in the short term. Like Mamdani had a bunch of stuff on grocery prices and on freeze the rent, like you got to do those. Cheryl had a freeze utility rates, declare a state of emergency and freeze utility rates, like you got to do that. An interesting under the radar thing for me on Tuesday was that the Democrats won 2 public service commission seats in the state of Georgia, ousting 2 of their 5 Republican utilities regulators. I really, really think utility costs, and this ties into your question about AI and data centers, are one of the next big things in our politics. Everyone is experiencing utility costs rising. The mass expansion of data centers is only going to make that worse. There was a study, can't remember if it was earlier this year or late last year, but within the last 12 months in Virginia, which I'm not too far from Northern Virginia, there's an area there called Data Center Alley where it's just nothing but data centers, like the data center epicenter of the universe. The Virginia legislature did an audit saying that every Virginia ratepayer's bill is going to go up by $400 in the coming years, simply because of the data centers that are already in the pipeline. So like that's real money, and that's happening everywhere. You're seeing opposition to these facilities in Minnesota, in Ohio, in Missouri, in Arizona. So this is like one of those next big things. And I think if Democrats don't follow through and don't do something about it in the short term, they're going to, all of the promise that they have from today for 26, 28, 30 and beyond is going to go poof and disappear. Like you said it, and now you have to do it and prove it.
It's just generally fits into this thing I say all the time, that there is a large coalition. It's not necessarily ideological, although I think progressives have answers for it, to tackling corporate power. And people don't even know that it's tackling corporate power, but like if you are upset about rising prices, you need to know that corporations are robbing you, and the government used to at least try to stop that from happening in some places, and no longer in any form is stopping you from being robbed by corporations. And the extent to which Democrats actually follow through with taking on people who are going to be mad at them and not give them money but are actually in opposition to their goals, is their willingness to do that is going to be their willingness to succeed. Like it is, it is a reminder that in Massachusetts, for example, we had a quote unquote energy bill written by National Grid and Eversource, and then and it made it illegal for solar, and then they had to go back and rewrite it because they didn't even know what was in this bill. They just let these corporate hacks write it, and then it turned out that it was really bad. It was really bad, and so they had to go back and fix it. And like these utility companies, which shouldn't exist because they're just using public money for public things. They are just extracting profit from a public built system for the public where there's no competition. Like unless you are willing to take them on directly and say you will not make profit, then utility prices are going to go up. It's just as simple. Like and direct them to things that actually, like the other piece that's making prices go up is Trump dismantling the money subsidies for green energy and green technology, and so like you have this buy thing where you have like giving free money for AI. So you're giving people free money to be put out of jobs. At the same time, you're rising costs by taking away subsidies for greener things, which were also just not subsidies for greener things, but just subsidies for the cost of electricity. And so you're sort of like these twofold things. And if any party is interested in tackling that, like the buy for thing across the economy as a whole, there is a large portion of votes out there to tackle this problem. But you have to be willing to take on corporate power and corporate money and corporate communications unabashedly.
Yeah, you said it up in this like hands off. Oh, it's just capitalism. There's nothing we can do about it, right? But what you're talking about is asserting the government's role over industrial policy, basically saying that we have a role as the public through our elected officials in deciding what the American economy looks like and is based on. And instead of it being based on 7 companies passing fake money around to each other and building, AI tools that just steal stuff from artists and authors and turn it into slop, right? We can choose to direct investment elsewhere. And we're letting a bunch of tech CEO sociopaths decide the path of the American economy. And we just don't have to. This is one of the things I say all the time when I'm working with state legislators is anything that was done can be undone, right? Like you can undo decisions that were made, and then you can just simply do things. You can simply ban the bad stuff, right? You can make different decisions. You can just, the role of the government in this instance is to decide what the economy is supposed to look like, what rules corporations are supposed to play under, what the market structure is supposed to be, and then you let all of those capitalist forces happen kind of underneath that. But there's an assertiveness there that we have been quite deliberately not using for decades.
No, well, we have been, I'd say, in Massachusetts more than other places.
I would say kind of a framework of understanding that if there's ultimately a game happens, somebody sets the rules of the game. If somebody is setting the rules of the game, they can change those. They can tighten the rules of the game. They can do different things about it. A game does not play on its own.
And it's not. I think it's always important because people yes, it's an industrial policy, yes, it's things, but it's basically saying are we going to have an economy where lots of people have opportunities to succeed and the government is going to put money into allowing that to happen? Or are you going to have a not market where there's just a bunch of rich people deciding how much they can get away with stealing from you before you get upset? That's not actually marketplace. That's not the thing that Americans pretend to want. That's actually just a form of autocratic dystopian nightmare, but it's not an actual marketplace. A marketplace would be hundreds of people competing for your business to make the combination of the best product at the best price. But you're not getting that. You're getting a crappy product for prices you can't afford, right? Food tastes less. There's less of it. Your housing is good. I always think about we put a ton of money into our home to try to make it nicer. Across the street from us is a corporate landlord owner who is charging almost 3 times as much in rent as we charge, and the building is falling apart. That's your choice, right? You get a corporate entity who owns most of the block in my neighborhood, who does not care, Or do you want a bunch of small people like myself who are like, I'm going to try and make this thing that I made as best as possible? And like that's actually a large part what's happening is it's not a marketplace. They're not competing for your business. These are just corporations that are so big that are just telling you, F you, we'll do whatever we want. And our elected officials are giving them our tax money to do it, which is just should not happen and does not need to happen. We could be investing in lots of corporations that do, like we could be creating incubators, we could be creating lots of competition, and we could be funding the free money we're giving these corporations, we're giving to that and by contrast.
And one thing I think just to kind of underscore and kind of build off of that a bit, as well as the point, Pat, that you're noting about the need to deliver, is that showing that you can deliver for people on small things is how you can build up goodwill for anything that either if it takes longer to achieve, if it's a more ambitious thing. Because if people think that you're going to promise something and then nothing will change, and whatever problem is gets worse, causes them to be either disillusioned to like maybe they stay home, maybe they vote for somebody else, or maybe they're just simply like, yeah, or kind of that you lose that fundamental goodwill that you can do by identifying the clear harms that people can face on a day-to-day basis with that have clear tangible causes and addressing them, which should be something that's straightforward in politics more than it sometimes is.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. I'm going to ask everybody for your final thoughts. Pat, you'll be last. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to say if you're a voter, you need to think about your local, your state, and your federal levels. All of them vote for people who are going to rein in corporate power and make an even playing field, so that we're not crushed by these gigantic monopolies. And if you are an elected official, the moral of the story from today is you better do these things. You can't just talk about them, right? So you get into office, you win on these ideas, and you have to enact them. You have to do them as fast as possible with change that is going to hit people's pocketbooks right away. That's my final word here. I'm going to pass it to, let's see, I'm going to have Jonathan and then Jordan and then Pat. So Jonathan, go ahead.
To tag back onto something I mentioned before when I was talking about that one kind of recent Oxfam piece about the growing wealth of billionaires, basically the kind of policy recommendations that Ultimate had fell into four buckets of: one, that you need to rein in corporate power over the economic and political system; two, that you need to start taxing the rich much more, especially getting at their wealth; three, that you need to strengthen the social safety net and general social infrastructure; and four, empower unions. And basically anything that for us to have a better, more equitable economy, and with that a stronger democracy, because of the way in which kind of, let's say, monarchy and autocracy in the kind of economic sphere gets into the democratic sphere, we'll need to be pushing forward on all four of those.
I'll just say that the affordability thing, there is a huge demographic out there to win votes, and that also means something that I think progressives could do more of, which is just supporting small businesses. The idea of people creating jobs 5 at a time, 4 at a time. We could be having policies that we could be pushing our legislators to support that. We could be having policies that support it. We could be, there is all of these large business organizations, all of these landlord organizations, they are representing the interests of large corporations and large people. And there is an opportunity to speak to people who are actually struggling on a day-to-day, who are also, the majority of small business owners are renters, as an example. And so they care about rising rental prices because they're also getting priced out of the things that they're trying to do. And so there is just an opportunity to really, if we really base our policies on on regular people who are trying to make a living, trying to get a Dubai, trying to get a job, making things less expensive for them, and attacking these large corporations, there are huge opportunities out there to speak to that, to win elections, to do that. And so I just think that's the fight of the future.
Pat Garofalo, take us home.
First off, just thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's been a blast. You all are awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. For me, when I talk to state legislators all over the country, even well-meaning ones have this sense of a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. It's inevitable. The direction we're going is inevitable. And therefore, I'm just desperate to get my slice of the slop. Like, give my community its piece of the garbage pie, and I will be happy with that. And I really just want to send the message that there is a different way. There's a better path. There's policy being worked on all over the country. It may be 3 states away. It may be 3 time zones away. But there is a better way, and people are experimenting and trying stuff. And there are folks who will back you, voters, advocates, whoever, small business owners, if you decide to try something different. So look out there. You can reach out to me, the American Economic Liberties Project, to get some of those ideas. But there's a whole world of folks working on this stuff. So please, please, please use a little imagination. It is not inevitable, and you can unmake some of the decisions that have been made to get us here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What a pleasure having you on, Pat. And thanks as always to our listeners. Feel free to forward the show, feel free to donate to the show, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Hey there. Thanks so much for watching us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. And it would be amazing if you would also subscribe to us on your favorite podcast player. Just look for Incorruptible Massachusetts wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much.